We got the top 5 rules for DC20. I'm gonna do a whole breakdown of what each of these 5 rules are, and I wanna know if you already knew about this rule. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, and if I missed one that was your favorite, let me know. And these 5 rules span the entirety of the game. We have an overall rule, in combat, out of combat, marshals, and spellcasters. We got it all. All this comes from my own thoughts and the community polls. And if you're not part of this community, hey, I'm the Dungeon Coach, creator of DC20, and I'm gonna be breaking all this down because in 2 weeks from now, the Kickstarter launches for DC20. So if any of this sounds interesting, there's a ton of live streams, a ton of the videos I've done, and the Kickstarter is going to break it all down, what that has to offer, and the link to that is in the description. Check it out, share this with your friends. Let's see what their favorite rules are. Let's go. These rules also aren't in any particular order. I'm going to talk about them in the way I first outlined them. The first one is the overall span of the game is that high rolls matter. And some examples across the span of the game is in combat. Whenever you attack somebody, whether it be spells or swinging your sword, if you hit their defense, you deal damage. Every 5 that you beat their defense by, you deal additional damage. What this system does is allow you to care about more than just hitting or not. It's you hit, but how hard did you hit? And a natural 20 just adds damage on top of that always. And then in the exploration mode, if you're looking around looking for clues, let's say you're searching, investigating, looking through treasure hoards, whatever you're doing, there's a DC for these checks, whether it be investigation or you're sneaking around or you're trying to look around for things. There's a DC for it. And if you beat it by 5, more cool stuff happens. 5 more than that, even more. Your rolls always matter. Your character being really good at something always matters. Even in skill challenges where you have to get success points together as a group and everybody's coming up with different ways to kind of help each other towards the cause. If you beat the DC of that skill challenge by 5, you get another point and another point to build up to your skill challenge total. I'll never forget my favorite moment that highlighted this as I was at playtesting at Gen Con with Duke from One Shot Questers and his crew, and it's this big final moment. It's Duke's turn. He's fighting the boss and he rolls a dice and he gets an 18. Now normally an 18 wouldn't be too exciting and you just were able to, oh, okay, 18 plus, okay, that hits, and then you move on. But this was, everyone jumped up at the table, yeah, because they know an 18 plus this, that means it hits this much. And then it was just an exciting moment when seeing an 18, which a lot of times gets left in the dust, actually be exciting. And there's secondary benefits to this type of concept of rolling high mattering always is help actions in DC20 also are plus 1d8 to the roll. So now you actually have a chance to have certain numbers be even higher and try and push even further and help your allies, incentivizing teamwork. The next 2 rules now we're talking about in combat versus out of combat. And the in combat rule, everybody's favorite, action points. DC20 has a 4 action point system. I have an entire video on action points that I will link down in the description if you want to know the full details as to what's going on here. But the gist of it is you have 4 action points. If you want to move, action point, attack, action point, help an ally, hide, grapple somebody, action point. You get the idea. If you keep doing the same action over and over again, you start to gain stacking disadvantage. So if you just keep attack, you start to gain disadvantage on the following extra attacks, balancing that out. But at the same time, you can also spend action points on your turn to give yourself advantage on something if it really means a lot to you. So the system's almost self-balancing in how it hands out advantage and disadvantage. And then these 4 action points can also be spent off your turn if your character has some sort of reaction or something happens that you're able to do something on. And reactions in DC20, you don't have a limited number of them. You just have reactions. And if you want to, you can spend your action points. But if you spend your action points, let's say you're last in initiative, you have 4 action points, something happens. There's also a very dynamic reaction pool that you have of choices depending on your character, depending on your class, how you build them, etc. But if an ally gets attacked, if a projectile comes at you, you could catch it if you're a monk. Opportunity attacks on enemies, of course, but you could also spell duel and cast magic at other opposing enemy spellcasters, magic colliding midair, lots of stuff can happen. So let's say you spend an action point on something, and then now it comes to your turn. Well, you only have this many action points now because you spent some already, and that's fine. You made that choice. Your action economy, you could choose to spread it out across your turn. Let's say you took another reaction sometime across before your turn came here. Now it's your turn, you only have this many action points. You can now spend those action points, your turn's over, and you get them all back. This keeps players engaged as you're going through combat because they could be able to help with each other, interact with things. Lots of stuff. Action points are great. It's the entire system. It makes building monsters easy. It makes characters be able to have customized fluid turns and options and versatility. But what about out of combat? I think this is one thing that people might not realize about DC20 that is true about DC20 is it's not just focused on combat. A lot of the alpha stuff, yes, has been focused on combat because that's the hardest pillar to make sure you really knock out of the park. But number 3 now is social exploration and really all aspects of the game having rules and systems for everything. I always felt so bad when new game masters didn't really know, or people had complained about different other pillars of the game and running travel or rest or downtime or even social interactions. There's no systems for it. You just kind of make checks when the game master feels like you can make checks for it, which sometimes you lose that stakes, you lose the risk and reward. There's just not a lot of support for some of the other pillars of the game from what we're used to. So I think a good example is Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It does a great job of like exploration roles, and while you're exploring, you can say you're doing a certain action while exploring, and they added some sort of game mechanics to it, and I really like that whenever I play Pathfinder. So with DC20, I really wanted to be able to support exploration and social pillars of the game, and of course combat. There's a whole combat system, of course, but there's also ways you could run combat that aren't combat. We have rounds of combat and initiative, which can take some time. There are an entire challenge system. There's combat, social, explorations, skill challenges. There's help challenges between your teammates and allies working together with groups and stuff. And with all these different systems and dice mechanics in place, it lets game masters be able to take these scenes and actually make something out of them. Let's say you're in the tundra and it's super cold and you have to take a rest. What dice systems are there? How would you run that? Okay, well, maybe you make them all make a save for exhaustion or something. Well, you could run an exploration skill challenge. What is everybody going to do to try and make it through the cold? Are people going to try and help make shelters? Is somebody going to burrow underground and try and get lower? What are you going to do using features and classes and skill checks and other things outside the box ways? Every person makes a check and tries to get success points for the group. I have also done exploration social skill challenge videos. I'll link that in the description too for that whole system, because you can use that in Pathfinder, D&D, DC20. You can use those for anything. But what is everybody going to do? How many success points do you need to succeed? If you fail, what's going to happen? If you succeed, maybe you find something. Maybe an ally starts to wander in from the snowy shadows and they have a gift for you. Who knows what these skill challenges could unlock for the group? Social systems where you're able to talk to NPCs and have more things going on than just rolling checks and having these things go on. There's a disposition system where an NPC has a certain disposition with you, specifically the player who's talking to them. And this combines not only dice rolls, but actual role play of what they say as well. So if a character really has some good stuff they say and they role play stuff that would actually trigger this NPC or touch on some of the hot points that this NPC has to offer. You remembered something the game master said about a friend or a brother they had that looked like this, and they have an earring on the left. This is that. Well, now whenever you say those things, this person's disposition can shift up or down one notch based on what you say role play wise. And then when you make the check, there's also a social check. You can of course influence and all that kind of stuff. So it combines role play and creative thinking along with dice rolling, because I want to be able to reward players for both. I want to be able to have those high rolls and reward those high rolls, and people that they respect and they listen and they learn about the game and they come up with great ideas and they say those. I want that to impact the game too. They don't have to have both and say creative things and roll well to be able to function. You can do either one, and if you do them both, awesome, and if you do neither, yikes. But that's the fun of it. You could accidentally say the wrong thing to an NPC and roll really low, ouch. Or maybe say the right thing to an NPC and you show them compassion when their whole life they haven't had any, and then you roll really high and it just mind blows. So social, exploration, combat are all taken to the next level, because also combat, you can do combat skill challenges. If you want to be able to have some little fight that doesn't really mean a whole bunch, but you don't want to actually roll initiative and go through that whole process, you just want to have a cool cinematic moment, you can have a combat skill challenge. You get all the cinematic and storytelling moments of it, but not all the time taken. I think it's one of the most shining pillars of DC20 that hasn't seen the light of day yet, because we've been focused on alpha and focused on combat so much, but you just wait. Next two rules now are about marshals and spellcasters, and what I've given both of them to be able to actually feel fun and enhanced and customizable and exciting to play. From level 1, no less. Level 1 of DC20. Not messing around. Showing some love to the marshals first. They get stamina points, which is a dynamic energy system that goes up and down based on what they do in combat. It's unique to the class as well. Every single martial class has unique ways that they gain stamina and unique ways that they spend stamina, so it goes up and down during combat. All marshals can also perform maneuvers instead of just attacking, and that's all they can do, and they can flavorfully describe something cool that they're doing. There's actually maneuvers that everyone can do. Trip attacks to make them prone, shove attacks to push them back, disabling them and causing disadvantage on their next attack, exposing them and causing an ally's next attack to be at advantage, slowing them down, bleeding them, hitting them for extra damage, hitting them from farther away. So many things you can do with maneuvers. Now, if you want to think about maneuvers as simple things you can add to your attacks to add a little bit of an effect onto each attack that you make, there's also one step above that called techniques. And techniques are also something that marshals are able to get, that they can perform big acts of strength. If you're more of a barbarian style thing, you could leap extremely high into the air smash down to the ground, causing a crater, and everybody goes flying. Now, that would be a pretty high-level technique, but we can actually accomplish that in DC20 with these techniques that characters are able to get. A lower-level version would just be like a heroic bash of just knocking someone super far back or leaping across a huge gap. Or my two personal favorite is Whirlwind, spinning around, hitting everybody around you, or Volley, getting across that class fantasy, being able to shoot a whole bunch of arrows off. And if that wasn't enough love for the martials already, every single weapon has a passive and active property, giving an actual difference to the type of choice that you make when you choose your weapon. And you can switch weapons mid-combat if you'd like and gain those different properties depending on what you wield. I really think DC20 offers martials with the kit that they should have to be able to play the game in a fun and immersive way, to be able to customize what you do with those swings, your choice of what weapon you wield actually mattering, being able to do big epic stuff, and a little bit of tactics with that stamina energy bar to be able to play with. Then of course there are spellcasters. Number one thing is spell slots. Spell slots are gone. No, please no. I've always hated spell slots. It's one of the first early things that I did not like about games like D&D and Pathfinder, where I was like, spell slots? What? Mana points. DC20 has mana points. Mana points are basically a simplified way to be able to cast spells. You have, let's say, 5 mana. And if a spell costs 1 mana, you spend it and you cast it. Done. But what also is implemented in DC20's spellcasting system are spell enhancements. Let's say that spell costs 1 mana to cast. Well, you could also spend additional mana when casting it to add spell effects onto it. And in a way, this causes spells to evolve. You're able to shoot 1 bolt of fire. Sure, spend 1 mana and you shoot a little firebolt. No problem. But if you want to evolve that spell into something like a Scorching Ray, if you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons spells, which shoots 3 bolts, you could spend 1 mana to cast a spell and another mana to enhance it and shoot out more beams. Or instead, what if you want to have it explode in one single area? So you spend mana and you shoot off the fireball and poof, it explodes. Customized spellcasting. And if you have things like cantrips, the simple light cantrip, oh, it costs 0 mana. It's a cantrip, sure. You have the light cantrip. You cast light, and then when you spend the mana, it's a flashbang. Creatures in the area make a save to be blinded. You get the idea. So even cantrips can be enhanced with mana to be really cool. And it gets better because spellcasters also roll for all of their spell casting. You don't just say, I cast slow, I cast fireball, and then the dungeon master or other NPCs or whatever make checks behind the screen and then they say pass or fail or something. No. Just like your marshals rolling crits and they crit and all this kind of crazy stuff, you can do the same thing with spells. If you want to cast the fireball, you make a spell check. See how high that is. And just like I said with the first rule in this thing, the higher that spell check is, the more damage your fireball does. And the same thing's true for healers. Healers can be a badass too now. Instead of just like, oh, I heal you, and then you get this amount. You can make a spell check, and you can critically heal somebody. Nat 20 on the dice, heal, adds more, crazy healing. Healers can be epic, and that slow spell we talked about. Also, any sort of effect. You make a check, they make a check, and you are trying to affect how much you slow them down. And not to mention, spellcasters can do spell duels midair, and if you see a spellcaster casting a spell, you can intercept it midair, taking a reaction off your turn, like we mentioned before as well. And your magics can clash midair and trying to basically the cool version of counterspell in DC20, where both players are spending action points or NPCs or whatever, and you can actually cancel their spells with magic colliding midair. And if you know the same spell as another spellcaster, you can do combo spell casting where you both cast the same spell together. And I've been doing a bunch of polls in the community. I've seen them all. I see the comments like, oh, I can't just pick one. I don't know. I like them all. Oh my gosh. And thank y'all for the hype and love and support. I feel it every day. Thank you so much for that. And the 2 honorable mentions that was not as part of the ones I just mentioned right now, the 2 that y'all really liked was the ancestry system. I'll also put that link down in the description of a customized ancestry system. How it works is you get to pick 2 ancestries, one of each parent, and that is the ancestry that you get to go with. You can mix and match a human and elf. You could pick elf, and you get some other benefits there if you do that, but I also talked about that in the last video. But it basically gives you either a default template to have your ancestry already pre-made for you, or if you want to make a little bit of tweaks, you can swap out some stuff with some expanded traits and swap out traits to make your own exact dwarf just the way you want it. Or you could branch out even further and mix and match and start doing some really interesting combos. Some of the stuff I've seen people make and be able to make the characters they wanted to make are awesome. And always clarify, when I say mix and match, if you wanted to make a dwarf that comes from a long line of dwarfs, absolutely do that. You could choose dwarf. And that secondary ancestry, you could choose something like halfling. And halflings have a trait called bravery. And if you wanted to make a dwarf that was brave, you would pick dwarf and halfling, but you would biologically be a dwarf, and mechanically you'd take that bravery and you'd have a brave dwarf. cool. You don't have to mix up the flavor and role play of what your class's like bloodline is with the mechanics of what you're choosing. I've even seen somebody make a paladin by choosing a fighter. That was the class they chose, and they were a human Angelborn. And all they did was take a few traits from Angelborn, which have some healing in there, and that gave them the feel of a paladin at level 1 when they really actually were a fighter. And this next rule speaks to my heart and core because this rule probably is my favorite rule in DC20, which, I mean, that might be, maybe I make a whole video just about that. But my favorite rule in DC20 is that you can give yourself advantage on the things that matter to you most in combat. Whenever you are in combat and something's really, really important to you, a goblin's about to run away and sound the alarm and you gotta grapple that goblin right now. Someone's about to get away and turn the corner and alert the thing in that. There's a spell, it's about to go off. I have to make this check right now. I'm about to heal somebody and they're gonna die if I don't heal. I have to do this now. In DC20, when there are important moments to you, whether it be tactical or for roleplay reasons, you have 4 action points on a turn, baby. And if you want to, you can spend action points to give yourself advantage. I said that in the first rule earlier in a second. But it's so cool when I see players. This means a lot to me. I'm going to give myself advantage again. You know what? I'm going to give myself double advantage. Yeah. All right, here we go. Actually, you know what? No, this means everything to me. I'm going to make this check and I'm giving myself triple advantage. This is everything to me. Now, is that wild and crazy? Is that broken? It's actually mathematically, it's not broken at all because as you gain advantage, there's diminishing returns. But it really amplifies. This means a lot to me. I just got chills. This means a lot to me, and I want to put all of my action economy into this one moment. And I have never seen a game system do that. And comment down below if there is one that has something like that. But it has been one of my favorite byproducts of this action point system and being able to grant advantage in this way. And has led to some of the most epic moments. So if any of this has gotten you excited, even just one rule has gotten you excited, click the link in the description for the Kickstarter. And if the Kickstarter is going right now, oh my gosh, it's a whole bunch of deals and offers and benefits and perks that I'm throwing out for the Kickstarter. I am throwing everything at you guys as we give you all the best deals possible to support this project, because this project is everything. Everything for the future of what we do here is all about this Kickstarter. So if you can back it and support it, awesome. If it's not the Kickstarter yet, buckle up, get ready. And if it's after, that link's always good to be able to jump on and see what's going on after the fact. I've been really excited to do this video and share the top 5 rules. I have another video coming out in a few weeks talking about the secret rules that you didn't even know were some of the best rules. We'll talk about that later. So stay creative, think outside the box. Peace.